I'd like now to introduce our keynote speaker, Tarek Madkour. He's a group program manager for the Visual Studio team at Microsoft, and he runs the group that deals with the editors and a lot of the IDE components, the stuff that actually makes us all very productive and hopefully makes our work as smooth and buttery as possible. But it does, right? I mean, is not Visual Studio the best tool out there, right? Yeah? Absolutely. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. Prior to this, Tarek was also a GPM for the Visual C++ team. So let's hear it for C++.
Yay!
Look at this, Tarek. You moved up in popularity here. And he's been with Microsoft forever. He's got some kids. Apparently, he puts home improvement in quotes. So his home improvement projects are like mine. With that, I'll turn it over to Tarek. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Rocky. I appreciate it. So I promise I am one of those people who actually really do enjoy talking to you. It's been fun talking to people about Visual Studio for that many years. Again, my name is Tarek. I work on the Visual Studio team at Microsoft. I started about 15 years ago, a little over 15 years ago, on Visual Studio. And I was there as part of the original .NET release. And at that time, I owned the little drop-down that was called the IntelliSense box. So when you hit dot, whatever showed up after that is what I worked on when I first started at Microsoft. And from there, yay! Favorite piece in the IDE. And at the time, C# and C++ were one team, so I actually did it for C# and C++. From there, I worked on a lot of different things: compilers, runtimes, code generators, ARM code generators, assembly language, C++, editors, IDEs, and we've done the whole different parts of Visual Studio, which makes it very, very exciting for me because every time I talk to somebody, I learn something new about something I worked on, which is really interesting, but I'm also definitely happy to talk about any part of Visual Studio. So I'll be talking to you today about Visual Studio and what's in store for the future. So on stage also is going to join me James Montemagno from our Xamarin team, and he's going to be later on giving you a demo of Xamarin 2. Just a quick show of hands. How many are .NET developers? Almost everybody. How many are C++ developers? A few. I applaud you. Anybody uses VB? C#? Mostly C#. All right. Well, I'm in the right place. Good. All right. So I'll talk to you about Visual Studio, what to expect with the next release of Visual Studio, as well as our direction and where we're going. I'll also talk about .NET as the runtime that you use, and C# as the language that most of you use. And we'll talk about where those are heading as well. And I'll give you some really cool and exciting demos, I hope, that you'll find valuable. So with that, let's get started. So developers. I remember I think it was my first year at Microsoft, and it was this guy from the leadership team at Microsoft stands up on stage and starts jumping up and down saying, developers, 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 developers. Do you know who that guy is? Yeah, Steve Ballmer. So he got us all passionate about developers. At that time, I felt like, okay, I made the right choice being in an exciting part of Microsoft. And in all honesty, it has been very, very exciting. We really care about developers. For us, developers are the ones that make their company successful. If you look at it, you enable new user experiences. You enable the company to run most of the time. You create products that your company is able to market to customers, or you help get their products to market. You are really the connection between your companies and the world. And your companies need you to be successful. So that is why we focus on developers, and we make sure that as a developer, you are successful. So we make sure that you have the powerful tools that you need in order to be able to do your job. We give you a good runtime, we give you the compilers, and we give you a great development environment that you can use to basically be as productive as possible. productivity is key to us. And in all honesty, that's why 2 years ago, when I was thinking about what next part of tools I work on, I picked the editor. So my team is the platform team. That's the part that does the editor, the build, the debugger, all of the core things that are used for all the languages. So that's what our team builds. And I thought this is really the key part about productivity that I would love to spend my next few years on. And it's been beautiful so far. The latest amazing change that I've seen at Microsoft is how open we've been. I mean, I can tell you 15 years ago, I would have never imagined that I'd be standing up on stage and telling you, like, yeah, the source code for that is on the internet. You can go and look at it. That would have never happened, ever. But now that's normal. In fact, I'm going to have a slide later on showing how much of Visual Studio and .NET is already open source. So we'll talk about that too. So we know a lot of you are being very productive by working in the open, and we want to make sure that we are committed to making sure that you are productive also working in open source or on your proprietary work. Another change that has happened over the years is that we transitioned Visual Studio from being the tool for creating the best applications for the Windows platform to being the best tool for every developer. Our goal is whatever language you're working with, whatever application you're trying to run, whatever platform you're trying to run, we want to make Visual Studio the tool for you. And that's our goal. That's where we want to be. And we've gone a long way in doing that. Windows is no longer our only target. You want to target iOS, you want to target Android, you want to do Mac, you want to target Linux. You can do all of that from inside Visual Studio. And to be able to target whatever platform you're on, we're extending the Visual Studio family. So Visual Studio Code, for example, is our newest addition to the family about a year ago, where it's a code editor that runs on Mac, runs on Linux, also runs on Windows. And it gives you an editor-centric experience that you can use from whatever platform you target. Visual Studio, obviously, is the big IDE on Windows, and that's the one that you can use to target Windows. But also in Visual Studio, we have the capability of targeting other platforms, which I'll show later today. Also, Visual Studio Team Services is our team-oriented cloud services. And these are the ones that provide you with all the great ability to manage your team flow, whether it being source control, or work item tracking, or release management, or continuous integration. I mean, the list of services that we have in Visual Studio Team Services grows on and on and on. And we provide that as either the on-premises version, Team Foundation Services, or the cloud-hosted version, Visual Studio Team Services. And the migration between that is making it as smooth as we can so that you can have part of your work on-premises, part of it online, switch, transition, it's your call. Today, I'll be focusing most of it on the Visual Studio part of the world. So I'm not talking much about Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Team Services, although if you're interested, happy after the talk, I'll be around. Feel free to reach me and I'm happy to chat. How many of you are using Visual Studio 2015 already? That's about maybe 75% of the room. 2013. Mostly almost the remainder. 2012. 2010? Let's see how many keep raising their hands. 2 people. 2008. I'm going to keep going as long as you're going. All right. 2005. I don't know how I still remember the years by heart. 2005? Nobody for 2005. Older? 1 person older. We're going to have to talk. All right. All right, so Visual Studio 2015 has been an amazing release for us. It kind of broke all our records. We have millions of active developers. We have now it's over 13 million the downloads of Visual Studio 2015 alone. We have a ton of extensions in the gallery that people use, over 6,000 of them. And we know that a lot of people are using Visual Studio extensions. And we love Visual Studio extensions because they round up our story. And they range anything from supporting COBOL and Fortran on the one hand. Anybody uses COBOL? No? Good, all right. And on the other hand, your most advanced, most modern, GitHub integration, for example. And, extensions cover that gamut of space that we have. We have we're nearing about 1,000 downloads per month at this point for extensions. So we know that a lot of people use Visual Studio extensions. And going forward, we're going to be stressing more on extensions for Visual Studio to target those other platforms. So when we're talking about Visual Studio for every application, for every platform, a big part of that is going to be our story with partners, as well as our story inside Visual Studio releasing on a faster cadence with extensions that you can download. So with that, I'll start talking a little bit about what's coming in the next release of Visual Studio, which we have appropriately called Visual Studio 15. And that's different from Visual Studio 2015, and don't ask me how. But that's the number system we chose. So how many people are using Visual Studio 15 already? How many have tried it? A few, so a handful. OK. So I'm going to do something weird here. This is Visual Studio 15. It comes in 2 flavors. Oh, sorry. Oh, you can see that. Good. Let me connect my mouse just to make it a bit easier. All right. So it comes as the full Visual Studio Enterprise that you know, with all the 40 gigabytes of goodness that we put into it at this point. Or you can download a preview with a new installer. Anybody tried that new installer yet? Nobody has. All right. Well, let's see. I'm going to actually start it. Run. So I'm going to do something here interesting. I'm going to try to run a Visual Studio installation on stage while I'm presenting. We have time, right? We have like, this is a what session? This is like a 60-minute session? We should be good, you think? Who thinks we'll be done before the session is done? That's the confidence I have? Who thinks are going to be done before this slide is done? All right. So I'm going to get Visual Studio started. So basically here, it asks you, we have this new installer. It kind of asks you, what do you want to install? And we have this new concept that we call Workloads. And it's based on our discussions with developers, as well as our telemetry. We've got a few people that check the please help Microsoft and send it some usage data, which doesn't give us any of your personal data, but it does tell us, well, 60% of developers did blah, 25% of developers did this and installed that. And the people that installed this also used that component. It kind of gives us some aggregate information that we can go by. And based on that information and our customer interviews, we have decided to pick some workloads. So I'm going to get some installation going here. We picked some workloads up front just to test the system. So we have just the small core editor that we promise you is just megabytes, not gigabytes. So right now it's sitting about 300 megabytes for the core Visual Studio shell. Basically, that includes everything from the editing and building and debugging. But it doesn't include any specific language. It's kind of generic for all the languages. Then we can add workloads for C#, desktop development. We have that now. Python, Unity, game development. And we're adding more. So expect that by the time we release Visual Studio 15, we're going to have all the workloads that you're expecting, especially, obviously, the .NET workloads.
In the past, I've been able to run the version of Visual Studios I'm on now and a new one to transition. Can we run this at the same time?
Beautiful. Question is, can you run versions side by side? Yes, you can. In fact, you can run 2 versions of Visual Studio 15 side by side. One for the big installer that has everything, and one for that little, small, fast Visual Studio. So you can do both side by side. And obviously, yes, you can do them side by side with the previous release, too. So we picked those workloads, right? And right now, I'm installing the smallest workload, which is just the editor, kind of seeing how that goes. Yesterday, I did a stress test of that, which I think was a new accomplishment for us. It's something we've not done before. I installed it on a plane. So that was my stress test, courtesy of GoGo in-flight Wi-Fi. It was an opportunity I could not let go, so I just tried it. So apologies if any of you were on the Seattle to Austin flight yesterday. I hogged all the GoGo bandwidth, I think. but it worked. It worked. So proud of it. It's an achievement. So anyway, the goal for this installer is that it's lightweight. The most important thing for us is that it's megabytes, not gigabytes. That's our goal. It's megabytes, not gigabytes. Regardless of what workload you're going to get, we think that in megabytes, you can get what you want. You can install it in minutes, not in hours. Our telemetry says that Visual Studio currently installs in a little over an hour for most people. So that's a lot of time, right? So we want to make it better than that. Faster, also more optimized. One of the most common user voice requests that we get is, I don't want all this other stuff that you have. Why do you keep giving me C++? Why do you keep giving me, I don't know, like if you don't use Visual Basic, why do you keep giving me Visual Basic? And we heard that feedback, so that's one of our goals there, is to make it very optimized for the scenario that you want. So we really picked the tools that we saw most people use. And even in C# development, the smallest that you could get, and we see that 75% of people just check the, yep, I want the C# development, next, next, done. And that took about 6 gigabytes of installation, and it was still over a half hour. So I mean, it's a large thing. So we're really shrinking that down. And the last thing, and to us is actually one of the most interesting things because it opens up new scenarios for us, is that it's a non-impactful install. You can install it. It doesn't impact your GAC. It doesn't impact your registry. It doesn't touch them at all. And when you're done, you uninstall it, and it's gone. That's basically our goal, right? And it looks like we're getting almost done here, which is great. So I started at what, 8:18 was it? So 2 minutes, actually 8:17, so 3 minutes now. And it's good, it's done. Visual Studio installed on stage. I didn't even switch slides yet. So let's get that started. Thank you. It detects who I am because I already have the other bigger Visual Studio installed on the machine, and we share a lot of information there, so it knows that I'm Tarek. It's signing me in, and here I am. So let's see what I can actually do with this release of Visual Studio. One of the new things we added is the ability to open a folder, not just open a project. With a lot of people looking at stuff online, you see something on GitHub that you like, you just want to clone it and start working with it quickly. And a lot of those things are not necessarily organized in projects and solutions. So one of our goals was, okay, you have some code lying around, or you got some code from the internet, and you want to be able to browse it really quickly, regardless of what language it's in, you're just going to be able to open that as a folder, which is what we have here. So I got this, downloaded this thing from GitHub, and let's go, I think I put it here, source, let's do that. I'm going to just open this as a folder. And what it's going to do is it's going to open the folder. In folder view, you see the physical files on disk. This is a Hyconator application. It basically creates some funky name that kind of makes it look like it's a haiku. And it's written in multiple languages. So I have a Go implementation, a PHP implementation, a Python, a Ruby. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to open the Go implementation here. And right out of the box, you see we already have statement colorization for Go. You get some basic IntelliSense as well. Let me try the Python one. There you go. You get the same here for Python. I'm going to go and get Ruby. There we go, right? So you're able to see quickly and edit any source tree and kind of go look and see what's happening. So it's a very quick way of browsing. In addition to that, you kind of get some basic search. So I could go here and do one of my favorite features of Visual Studio, which, funny enough, not a whole lot of people know about, which is navigate to. I call this the control elbow. It's actually control comma. But basically, just hit any key, you start typing something, and you hit enter, and it goes to that, whatever it is, symbol, file name, whatever. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do, see? If I can only spell. Right? It kind of shows me the symbols that I have. It also shows me the files that I have, tests that I have, all of that stuff. And you can quickly browse between the different ones. I'm going to go to the Ruby one. Here I am. Inside here, you can hit enter, def, going to get basic completion that you can have, right? So it's a very quick and lightweight way of getting started with code. And we did that by installing something that took a few minutes, right? So what else can I do? I showed some workloads, and one of the workloads was Python, right? So I can go back to that installer, and we believe that installer is kind of a living thing for us. You can go back there and can configure Visual Studio. You don't have to hunt through add remove programs and do all of that stuff. This is basically the place to go to acquire anything for Visual Studio. So you can go here and click Python and click modify, and it'll go. That'll take another 5 minutes, so I'm going to spare you that. When I have another Visual Studio installed that has Python installed, okay? So let's close. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go to that other Visual Studio that already has Python. So I'm going to open the Hyconator Python. And in there, again, I'm opening it as a folder, right? I can open the Python file. And there, I can actually, now that I've installed the Python tools, another 5 minutes, I can go and debug this and run it, right? I have Python installed on my machine. So I'm going to go and create a startup file. New file, startup.py. And I'm going to set this as the startup item. I'm going to edit it. Let's do import. Hyconator. Name equals hyconator.hyconate. Print name, right? Let's see if that works. I'm going to go inside my Python script, go all the way to the bottom here, see where the implementation for Hyconator is, for Hyconate is. Here it is. Seed, here's where I'm choosing stuff and returning the value. I'm going to put a breakpoint right here and see what debugging I can do. We have a little bug in this preview of Visual Studio 15 where I have to go tell it where my Python interpreter is. Well, seems like I have it. Good. Start running it, of course. Let's try that again. All right, so I started debugging, and there I'm actually stepping through the Python code. Let me step, step, step. You can go hover over. Here we go, and all the way out. And I can see the name. And now it actually got me the name Jolly Sun 5782. All right, so there you go. Python working just by installing, in a few minutes, Visual Studio. Let's stop that. And go back to our slides. All right. So we talked about installation. I showed you that. Next thing I want to talk about is my favorite topic of everything in Visual Studio, which is productivity. Our goal is to make you productive. You spend a lot of time in that box called the Visual Studio IDE. How many of you spend more than 4 hours a day in there? More than 8 hours a day in there? That's a lot of you. All right. It's a lot of time. I spend a lot of time in Visual Studio, too. Sometimes I just dream about Visual Studio. That's a true story. That's sad. All right. So our core, what we call the core inner loop, is the thing that you spend the most of your time on. You're editing, you're building, you're debugging. Edit, build, debug, all the time. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time debugging, even more than anything else. I don't know why, I just do that. And our goal is, if you are editing, What we want you to be able to do is, there are these repetitive tasks that happen all the time. You know, you're searching for something, you're navigating, you're going up a line, you're inserting a snippet, you're doing these things that get repeated every few minutes. And our goal is for those repeated things to be made easier with fewer clicks, with fewer keystrokes. That, to us, that is editor productivity. That inside the editor, whatever it is that you're typing, you can get so programmed at it, you can get so efficient at it that it becomes so much faster, right? For building, our goal is for that to take no time. That is really the difference between, yep, I can start looking at the thing versus, oh, okay, go get a coffee break and go, right? So our goal is for compilation to literally take no time, whether it's by doing it earlier on, by bringing in more information in the editor so when you compile, that thing is already done, or by preventing you from compiling to start with, so we bring more analysis up front, so you're getting it while editing so you don't have to build to be able to see those things, right? So that's our goal. Building time goes to 0. For diagnostics, it's all about having those powerful tools that enable you to zero in on the bugs as fast as you can, whether they are issues with the quality of the code, whether they're issues with the performance of the code. This is what we want to be able to have you zero in very, very quickly. And finally, we want to kind of bring in that testing as part of the diagnostics experience. So I'm going to show you a very quick demo of productivity in Visual Studio 15 and what we added. So I'll go back to Visual Studio. This time, I'm going to create a new project, all right? And I'm going to create a WPF application, all right? This is a simple WPF app. All I'm going to do is in the designer, I'm going to go and drag a label. And that label, let's just give it something. Hello, VS Live. I want to say hello to the people on the couch. It's my first time to have people on a couch. It's pretty cool. Hi. So, and let's give it a bigger font. Font size equals, I don't know, 48. Does that look good? Beautiful. All right. We have this. We can now run it. You're all familiar with that. Now, how many of you use XAML? Quarter of the room, all right? One of the hardest things about XAML is that you kind of wanted to make a change, you want to make a tweak. You look at it, don't like it, close, try to change it, build it again, run it again, go through that cycle again. Now you have this button here that enables you to select stuff, all the different elements in the XAML tree. You select this one, and you say show it in the live tree. You go there, here's where it is. You click on that, and you can go to the editor. And there, I can go do that. Instead of 48, I can make it 12. And you alt tab to that, and it's smaller. You can go and make it 55. And you alt tab to that, and it's bigger. It's basically live XAML editing in your application. Makes your life so much easier. It's that kind of stuff that saves you time, saves your company time, makes you more productive. All right, some of you are not using XAML. So let's stop that and bring something else. Let's open this project. This project is the same Hyconator, only it's a .NET application now, all right? So I'm going to go there with a .NET application that actually has a bunch of tests. And if you go look at these tests, I'm going to go look at it here. All these different tests that are running. I see some interesting tests that are on one line. I see this guy that kind of doesn't start with a capital letter, has the wrong casing. So one of the new things that we added in Visual Studio 15 is the ability to have coding styles and the ability to enforce those coding styles. So, and that also makes you faster because you can detect those things and not have to go wait for code reviews, or worse yet, have to deal with misaligned stuff and things that you can't actually read. So let me go and do Tools, Options. And in Tools Options, I'm going to go to Text Editor, C#, and there I have this new coding styles set. And there you can put new naming rules. So I'm going to create a new naming rule that's going to catch whenever I don't have methods that are Pascal cased. Okay, so methods shall be Pascal case. And I'll pick the items. What kind of symbols? I want methods and why not fields. All right. Oh. And I'm going to pick Pascal case will be the name. You can put a prefix here, so you can say like they should all start with something else, or what they end with, or how they're separated. I'm just going to leave it plain Pascal casing, okay? And I want to make it an error whenever one of those things happens, right? Say OK, OK. And if we wait here for a minute, what happens is this basically gets signaled as an error. You didn't have to build for that. It's running in the background. And you can go here and with a one click, say show potential fixes, right? And if you show that, fix the naming violation. And here's the change that's going to happen. And you can actually go do this throughout your whole document if you had more of those to be changed. So there you go. Just with a single click, you can go do that and enforce a naming convention. We have things there, very helpful. We have things there that also allow you to enforce where the braces are on lines, whether you do vars or not. I mean, this thing is pretty rich in terms of analysis. So I'm going to let you go and examine what's in there, but it's actually very easy to go. Like tools options, in fact, if you want to search tools options really quickly, you just go here and you do, what was it, styles? Style, and it's going to get you the first hits, enter. There you go. And it takes you exactly to the place that you want. All right? Let me remove that rule since we don't need it anymore. And I'll say, OK. All right.
Can you import styles and share?
Can you share styles? One of the common pieces of feedback is sharing settings in general between teams, including styles. And that's one of the things we're looking at now. It's not there yet. But there's sharing for you, sharing between different projects, but also sharing as part of a project. So you can go and say, for this project, save a certain file in that project and say, here's how I want it to be. So we're looking at these scenarios. They're not there yet. But that's where we eventually want it to go, yes. Let's go back to our slides. All right. So we talked about productivity. We talked about Visual Studio. But what about the actual runtime that you use? .NET has been evolving like crazy. I mean, I did not expect since 2001 how fast .NET was going to grow and the directions that we've taken .NET. So now, not only is it the best way to target Windows, we're actually extending it to be targeting all platforms, all devices, right? And with the latest acquisition of Xamarin, so Xamarin is now part of Microsoft, the Microsoft world, we literally target many, many, many devices. And there are billions of lines of code out there that target a lot of devices. So the family has gotten bigger. I'll get my clicker back, sorry. We have the .NET framework, and that is the thing that runs on Windows. And it is the core of our platform that comes as part of Windows and allows you to target Windows. Whether you're creating a desktop application on Windows, whether you're creating a service that's going to run on Windows, or whether you're creating a web page with ASP.NET, right? Then we have Xamarin, which we just acquired, that enables you to take that beauty of .NET and go cross-platform with it. Whether you want to target iOS, Android, or a whole lot of other devices out there, you can do that with Xamarin. And lately, we added this last addition to .NET, which is .NET Core, which is our version of .NET that is open source, that goes across all platforms and is compiled all platforms. .NET Framework is the thing that comes with Windows directly. So there used to be a time where you had to go and package .NET with your application, check if it's there or not. Now .NET is on most Windows machines. And if you check for the right version, you will find a version of .NET on the Windows that you're using. The other versions are distributed with the app. And that's kind of the picture if you look inside of what we're doing. .NET gives you these, .NET Framework gives you these like WPF, Windows Forms, ASP.NET. .NET Core is what we're building UWP, the Universal Windows Platform, on. It's also what we're building ASP.NET Core on. And Xamarin enables you to target those other operating systems. But on the library level, each has its own set of libraries. And while there's a lot of code sharing between those libraries, your job as a developer when it comes to actually writing code that is going to be shared across multiple platforms. How many of you use multiple platforms, target market platforms? Just a few. All right. Your job was hard because you had to create those portable class libraries. And portable class libraries, you have to tell it each time what platform you're targeting. And if anything is like the recent years, new platforms come out every time. And it's really hard to go and say, like, yep, I still want that new one. I still want that new one. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to do that? Which is where we want to go with the future of .NET. Have one standard library, a .NET standard library, that can be used across all the .NET implementations. Whether you're targeting Windows, using ASP.NET, you're doing .NET Core and running it on Linux, or whether you are running it on an iOS device. All of these would be using the same .NET Core standard library. And they're all built on the open source common infrastructure that we have. So now your code can directly reference that library, and you write it once for sure. Where we intend to spend our time in innovation is basically in that .NET standard library. When we add something new, rather than adding it to a specific, say, add it to ASP.NET and have the iOS guys go with MV and saying, like, when can I get that? We're going to be adding things to the core of .NET, either at the common infrastructure level or the .NET library level. And that makes it available to all the different workloads that we have. Obviously, we continued our innovation in the tools, and we'll continue innovation in app models as well. All of this is developed in the open. So .NET now is open source. We got a ton of people contributing to it. This is good in multiple ways. Number one is discussions. So we have beautiful discussions with the community now, whereas it used to be discussions after we ship something every few years. And we're like, hey, well, how about this? How about that? Why don't you do this one? And now it's going into, on a check-in by check-in basis, we're getting reviews from the community and comments, which is a great thing. But also, it is great because contribution, you got over 4,000 people contributing to .NET at this point, or to .NET projects at this point, which is fantastic in terms of speed and momentum. You get to do a lot of things. Now, some people get scared by that because they say, well, open source, can I really trust it? All those people typing code in there, can I really trust that anymore? Two things. One, any code contribution to get accepted has to go through a rigorous testing process, the same one that we use for our own check-in. The second one is it's supported by Microsoft, and we wouldn't support it if we couldn't trust that code, right? So definitely rest assured, it's actually a good thing. We have the .NET Foundation that helps us steer all of that open source discussion. And they are the ones that manage all the different .NET projects out there in the open source. So if you actually go to our GitHub repository and look, you're going to find a ton of open source .NET projects to look at, including obviously the .NET compiler platform and some of our runtimes too. And lately we've added Mono and the Xamarin SDK to that portfolio too. It's not just Microsoft steering the direction of .NET. We have a number of partners, and they help us share where that platform is going. Unity provides fantastic gaming platform. JetBrains provide very good tools for .NET developers, and Red Hat, obviously, of Linux fame. Last thing I'm talking about in .NET is what we're doing for the different platforms that we're targeting, right? So for WPF, I talked about the improvements in tooling with edit and continue. But one of my most important pieces of things that we've added is the support for high DPI monitors. So with the advent of really good monitors, things like the Surface Book, Macs, obviously, these are all high-density displays. And WPF now has very good support for high density, including when different monitors have different densities and having automatically scaling to represent that. Also improvements to cryptography that we've added to WPF in this release. Similarly, improvements to the Windows platform, the Universal Windows platform. First, with a number of fixes of issues that customers have reported, but more importantly, support for all the new things that are coming up. So whether it's Xbox and new .NET development for Xbox, which is now possible, or the HoloLens, and now .NET is the main tool to target HoloLens, these are new things that we've added to that UWP platform. On the language side, we continue to innovate in C#. VB is also something that we kind of look at and make sure that it matches the development that we have in C#, and we continue to invest in F# as well. How many use F#? One person. All right. I'll not spend a lot of time on it then. We talked a bit about .NET Core. This is basically the picture that you have today, modulo ASP.NET Core 1.0. So we added ASP.NET Core 1.0, and then we took that cross-platform. So now we have the .NET Core libraries with .NET Core 1.0 on it, and that runs on Apple, Linux, and Windows. And then ASP.NET Core runs on top of that. ASP.NET Core is basically the new version of ASP.NET. We didn't call it ASP.NET 5 because we're kind of building it. It's kind of a different model. We're building it up from scratch, and we can talk more about that. That's its own 1 hour. But basically, it's kind of a shift in paradigm, and we're taking a lot of what you already have in ASP.NET, adding it to ASP.NET Core, and we're taking it cross-platform, which is the big thing that it actually provides. And we develop all of these components in the open source, so you can actually go and look at them now. So I'll give you a quick demo of C#7. So this is a quick application. Basically, all it does is it takes some numbers and adds them. And I put these numbers in an object array. And the reason I put these in an object array is because there are some people like my daughter, Heidi, and what she does, she's actually in kindergarten. And she's been learning all these big things like counting to 100. And one day I'm asking her, I count to 100, and she goes like, 1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100, I'm done. I'm like, okay. So this fairly new method of counting that I have to accommodate for. So in honor of her method of counting, it's now an object array that has numbers and anything else you might say in the middle that just works. And there I'm tallying these numbers with this simple function here that kind of goes and checks if it's an int. If it's an int, it adds it to the count and increments the count. I can run that, and it should work. That's just Windows not liking my Mac. Some 2002, 4 numbers. All right? One of the new things we added in C#6 was interpolated strings. So I no longer have to do this 0, 1, comma, comma, something at the end, which number was it. I can just directly go here, do $, remove that, T dot, I get IntelliSense inside the string, sum, and here, T dot count, right? There you go. And then your string is kind of easier to read and easier to maintain too. But more importantly, with C#7, we're going to see how here I say if v is int, and then I say int I cast from v, right? Now I can just do this. V is int I, and we match the pattern, and we create this new variable for you, a scope to the right place. I can remove this, and now it works, right? Control Shift, yay. Control Shift 5. Still works. But most importantly is my most favorite feature, which is see how I've, returning a complex type, I've had to create the type and then return that type. Sometimes you can just go and do that. Remove this and go up here and say, instead of some result, you just define what it's going to be. Int, sum, int count. Close it, and here you return that. That's it. And that's all you need to type for C#7 to make this work, which is fantastic. Yes?
So now the definition changes, so the method can return more than one or one value. Is that what you're saying?
No, the method can return a complex value. That's correct. Still, it cannot be overloaded in the return type, but yes, it can return more than one value. And because I have this as a var, I can go directly here, and I don't even need to change what I'm assigning it to. All right, I'll take us back. So that was a very quick, what we're doing for .NET. One of the most important things we're doing for .NET is actually taking it cross-platform, and I showed you that with .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. But one of the most exciting things is actually taking it to devices. How many of you target devices? A few. All right, well, more of you will be, I promise you. So now with our acquisition of Xamarin, C# is running on 2.6 billion devices worldwide. I'm not going to talk a lot about Xamarin. I think the best thing to do is to tell you, number one, it is included as part of Visual Studio. So now as a Visual Studio developer, you get Xamarin for free. Whether you use Community, you get the community version of Xamarin, or whether you use Professional or Enterprise, where you get kind of additional support in terms of university and discounts for the test cloud. But the best way to show that is by a demo. So James, please come on stage. James Montemagno is developer evangelist on our Xamarin team, and he is the right person to show you around Xamarin.
Cool, let me get re-mic'd up. Cool, hey. All right. Can everyone hear me? Is this thing working? We're good, okay, I'm gonna switch over here. Now, you missed an important thing there too, that community edition, that's full-fledged Xamarin, everything 100% for free in there, so you're good to go. There's no real restrictions, you just kind of get some additional goodness if you're over on the other tiers of MSDN. So cool, I'm inside of Visual Studio 2015. Tarek said I had 10 minutes. He's like, show him a bunch of cool stuff, so I'm gonna try to do it. And I just took a red eye and I got so much energy. Let's do this. All right, cool. So I'm inside of Visual Studio 2015, what you guys have access to today. I'm just gonna go in, I have Xamarin installed. You can go to xamarin.com and get the download, or you install it directly with Visual Studio 2015. It's one of those checkboxes that adds a few gigs. Cool. So I've got it installed, and just like you would expect, I get some new project templates. Things like Android, iOS, cross-platform project templates in here. And this is where you're going to get started with iOS or Android development. I'm just going to go ahead and select an iPhone application, and app 15 sounds perfect. There we go. And we have a nice little getting started guide, and you can read all about it. But what I want to kind of show is that right here, if I zoom in, you can see that I have references. I have analyzers, I have system core, XML, Xamarin, iOS. These are the core things in the iOS libraries. Now, iOS applications are based on this thing called a storyboard. It's kind of a complete overview of your application. This thing is really big. It can transform to be on an iPad or an iPhone. And you can modify the storyboard here to say I want to design for an iPhone 4S per se. We have a full toolbox on the right-hand side, so let's slap down some controls. Let's put in a label in here. There we go. Oh, where is it at? There we go. Label. Slap it over there. Beautiful label. I can make it a little bit bigger. There we go. You can do different constraints. If you rotate the iPhone, it'll rotate with it. Let's slap down a map really quick here. There we go. That looks good. Make it a little bit bigger. And it wouldn't be a demo with having a button to click. So let's put down a button. There we go. Now, like every single application I've created, I've gone in usually and I start naming things. So I go down to my property grid and I'll say my button. And then I'll say my map. There we go. And let's call it my label. That'll make it really easy to find. There we go. Now we need some code behind. We have our UI. It is beautiful. As you can see, UI designer. Spent 5 years getting into this level. And the code behind here is this thing called a ViewController. A view controller represents the screen of the application. And I have some things in here such as view did load and did receive memory warning and things like that. So if I'm doing too much with memory, I'll get that notification. Let me go ahead and unlock this Mac. There we go. Cool. So now what I want to do is every time, let's say, I move that map around, I want to update that label. So I'm going to say my map, and I'm going to say region change. There's some events in here. I'm going to say plus equals, and I'll do some sender args, a little lambda in there. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to grab the center point. You can see I'm just writing some C# code. I'm going to say my map dot region dot center. There we go. Now, of course, Tarek showed us some cool C#6 features. So let's take that my label and update the text here. And we'll use some C# features. C#6 features, I'll say you are at center dot latitude and center dot longitude. Cool. All right. We have that button, though, so we want to do something with it. Now, what I want to show you is that you can come up to the top here. We have all those using statements, so I could come up and I could say, using, system, link. If you want to, why not? Go for it. Well, that's some .NET APIs. Those are shipping with the Mono runtime. But I can come in, I can say using some iOS APIs like core location, and maybe using MapKit. There we go, some core underlying APIs. So I can say, you know what? Every time I click that button, wherever I'm at in the center, what I would like to do is do a reverse geolocation in real time using the core underlying APIs. So let's say my button dot touch up inside, aka clicked, and we're going to do plus equals and again some sender args. There we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab that center point again. There we go. There's my center point. And now what I want to do is do a reverse geolocation. So I'm going to create a geocoder. I'm going to say new CL, core location geocoder. That's actually an iOS API under the hood there. Now I'm going to do some magic, and I'm going to do a reverse geolocation lookup. So I'm going to grab some addresses here. I'm going to await on this geocoder dot, and here's every single API inside of it. And I happen to memorize this one. And we can see there's reverse geolocation and reverse geolocation async. We even take those iOS APIs and we make them better by adding awesome C# features like events, lambdas, async await, right? So of course we want the async version. And we know we're going to have to write async up there. So there it is. And what we need to pass in here is a CL location. So I'm going to say new CL location. And that's going to take in a lat and long. So I'll do center dot lat, center dot long. There we go. And let's make sure we close that off. Cool. So we got async awaited. It's going to come back on the UI thread. And the last thing I need to do is add a pin onto this map. Let's say my map dot add annotation. And we're going to do an add new MK. What is it? Point annotation. Cool. There we go. And we're just going to fill in a few things. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to say the coordinate is going to be the center point. And then we can set a title on it. There we go. And this address that I got is actually an array of markers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to index in on it, make sure things aren't null, dot name. And if anything's null, we'll just say unknown, and we'll be good to go. Cool. Just about 10 lines of C# code. I can go now and I can compile up this application. Now this is going to compile all my C# code locally right on my PC right here. And then I would actually want to start obviously debugging it and see what my code looks like and actually running on this map. In that instance, you do have to be connected somewhere on your map to do that. Apple doesn't let us get around their EULA. But we can see I actually have a Mac up here. It's just sitting here. And I could switch over and you could see it just on Chrome. But I'm going to select an iPhone here. I'm going to say launch and debug. Let's do a few things here. Let's go ahead and add some breakpoints. There we go. And what we have here is our iOS simulator for the PC. It's in preview today that you get your hands on. You don't have to leave your Visual Studio, don't have to leave your PC. You're right here, and I've already hit a breakpoint right inside, right on my PC. That's freaking cool. But better, now that we have this beautiful map and we can see it's already updated some stuff, is I have a finger and I have a touch screen, so I can go ahead and just kind of move this puppy around. Now, of course, that map is small, so I'll take 2 fingers and I'll go ahead and do that. This is something that you can't even do on a Mac on the official iOS simulator because Macs don't have touch screens. So let's do this, and now I can zoom in here. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of pretty, we just make everything better. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and say button, click. This is going to go ahead and do a reverse geolocation. We see I have one place marker map, and I go in, I can get detailed information on it and get more. And let's go ahead and add that pin on there and see what happens. Boom. And there we go. I can tap on the pin, and it's some random address somewhere by my house, actually, in Seattle, which is pretty cool. Building a full iOS application in just a few minutes.
That's pretty amazing, James. It's pretty amazing. And I take it you can have a full life cycle with this application, not just developed on your machine?
Absolutely. I mean, I would totally try to ship this to the App Store. Apple will definitely reject it. So let's look at something that's a little bit more full-fledged. We built this application called the My Driving application. It's a smart IoT-enabled application. And we can see it's in the middle of the ocean. So I'm going to go into settings, and let's simulate a freeway drive here. There we go. All right, so this application normally would be on a physical iPhone or an Android or a Windows 10 device. This is going to use your geolocation and actually start tracking your trips. It's called My Driving. But the cool part is that you can take an OBD sensor, either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, plug it into your car, and it'll read all your car's sensor data, shove that up into IoT Hub, do some machine learning on it, and then tell you how you're driving. So let's, yeah. And me, so here I could actually start.
That's scary.
It's actually a little scary. Yeah, so let's use the simulator here, and we'll see it's going to start pulling in some information here. We can stop that. OK, that's a beautiful name for a trip. There we go. It's going to save the trip. That's going to actually push it up into Azure currently. Right, we're thinking our back end, front end. Here we can see I have a whole bunch of different drives in here. Here's one that's a really short one. There we go. We get the full map in there. And then I can go to my profile. Adorable, but not a great driver. There we go. Now, what's cool here is that I can go and I can see I'm driving. We're doing machine learning. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my Android phone here, too. And I have the same exact application installed. That I actually installed. I didn't even run it or debug here. I just installed it via Hockey app. And I'm driving here. I'm doing the same thing. I'll go into my trips. This is going to, of course, go out. And we can see right here, 5:17, 9 o'clock. We're supposed to be done, but I'm going to say, give us one more minute. 46 seconds ago, pulled it back down. I could get that drive and pull down all the points that are right there. So all this information, online, offline, synchronized with Azure Backend. And what's cool about this is that this is all open source, this entire application at azure.com/mydriving. We developed it, open sourced it, everything from all the machine learning modules, the Xamarin applications, the backend, the synchronization. It's amazing. You can grab all the source code here. When we're talking that dev cycle, like rub a little DevOps on it, this entire thing just isn't open source on GitHub, but as we were developing it, we did it in 5 weeks with 4 developers, everything. It was really crazy, small team, so we wanted to make sure that as we're committing code, we weren't breaking builds, but also not breaking our unit tests or our user interface tests. So you can grab the code, but what we can see here is I'm inside of Team Services that you mentioned earlier. Part of Visual Studio Team Services, or VSTS as we like to call it. Here's all the different build definitions I have. And you can see everything is looking green. There's a little red down there a few days ago. Someone broke that build. But we can see what this is doing. Is inside this feature branch, I'm bumping the version number, I'm downloading any key store information I need, building my application, signing it, and then I'm running all of these tests in the Xamarin Test Cloud. And many people are wondering, what is the Xamarin Test Cloud? And that's a great question, glad everyone asked. Essentially, it is the largest device lab with over 2,300 unique iOS and Android devices to do automated user interface testing. And it works in any single application, whether it's written with Xamarin, Objective-C, Java, it doesn't matter. It's the C# syntax. You say, tap this button, do this thing, inspect these elements. So when your users are doing something, you can make sure that your app is still working. So here's our app, iOS and Android. And here's a few tests we can see I did. This is a regression suite we do every night. These are real physical devices running in our test cloud lab. I can tap on one of them. I can get detailed memory usage, CPU usage, console logs, and make sure things aren't breaking. For instance, we can see a few days ago on our Android build, we actually had a crash. So these are the same exact tests, and as we go down, we can actually see that for some reason, this Galaxy Tab Pro 4 couldn't start a trip. So now I could actually go into that, get all the log information. So that's step one. Final steps really is that once we say it's good to go, we publish it. So here in the release part, when we stamp a build, we say publish, and this deploys automatically to Hockey App to do ad hoc testing, but also for crash reporting and analytics. So you can see all my applications here. Once it gets uploaded to Hockey App, I can distribute it to everyone. In fact, when you go to azure.com/mydriving, you can sign up for Hockey App and download it right now today. And that's the entire life cycle, C# front to end. It's amazing.
That's great. Thanks, James. You know what I love most about this is that it's C#. It's all C#. In fact, what you were typing there, didn't look much different from what I was typing in the way I was handling things for even writing a Windows desktop application, modulo some really interesting APIs that I never had before. So that's really cool that anybody can actually get started writing a device applications with .NET now with Xamarin. So that's fantastic. So just to recap, thanks all for attending. I hope you love Visual Studio as much as we do. We think that with Visual Studio 2015, that is the most productive tool in the industry, and we're making it even better with Visual Studio 15, which is now in preview. You can actually go and download that and give it a try and tell us what you think. With productivity, whether you're editing, building, debugging, and actually last was commit, which we actually never talked about, but we have fantastic Git integration now. I did not show that, but I can happily show that offline to anybody that wants it. And with .NET, you're targeting any platform that you want. So please, go ahead, download Visual Studio 15, and thanks a lot.